everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And today, welcome to one of the most long-awaited episodes that we have been wanting to do, and that is the Batcats preview for the upcoming season, the 2024 season, after a season that famously did not go as Connor and I both believed and wanted it to, with the Batcats getting screwed out of the NCAA tournament, including a team that they swept, getting in over them as an at-large team. I'm still bitter about it, just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, because going into the year, we didn't really know what to expect, because we just didn't know what we had. Tyson Neighbors was a complete unknown at that point as well. Like, we had seen him pitch and knew he had some talent, but we didn't really have a whole lot to base any major expectations off of. We liked Kalen Culpepper a lot, but most of the year we were just or going into the year at least, we just didn't really know what to expect. And we got off to that hot start and just couldn't quite do enough to get into the tournament, which I think we've made the necessary adjustments to put ourselves in a really good spot preseason to play our way into the tournament.
Yeah. And the team's been receiving a lot of preseason hype, with D1 Baseball ranking them as the 24th best team in the country. Sometimes you're getting even higher depending on what metrics you're looking at. But, we're here to just preview what the entire team looks like, talk about perhaps why the hype has been growing as quickly as it has. And we're just going to go ahead and start off with the pitchers. Of course, we're going to go through positionally. So we're just going to start off with the pitchers, because pitching, I think, was the biggest question mark last year. And in the offseason, you and I believed that it was going to be the biggest question mark about this team more generally. And granted, a few of those things changed, and we can start by discussing the number one, day one starter for K-State, and that is Owen Borema, who apparently has bulked up and added a few miles per hour, but we thought he was gone. We thought he was out of eligibility.
Yeah, I did not think he could come back. And so when I saw it was announced he was coming back, that was absolutely massive, because it's so massive to keep a day one starter as good as Owen Borema was. And it is great to keep a guy that was just kind of dominant at times throughout conference play. And it's also notable that he, like you said, added some additional muscle and allegedly has added a few ticks to his fastball as well, to where he's hopefully pushing 90 now, because that was really the only thing he didn't have in his game last year, was just velocity, because his placement was generally great. And he had a nice bag of tricks that he could go to. Just didn't really have the velocity there. Although he is one of those pitchers where he gets so far out in front of it that
it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, it almost doesn't matter. Where there's a select few pitchers that can kind of get away with that, and he's one of them. Having such long arms and such a huge frame is helpful with that, because he's 6'5" and all of it. But getting your number one starter back is massive, because that was not something that we expected. So that's a huge plus already for this pitching staff.
Yeah, especially because he was making waves as one of the better pitchers in the Big 12 last year, both in terms of strikeouts, efficiency, and eating innings, which you could say a lot of things about Owen Borema. Probably the best part about his game is that you don't have to worry all that much about your bullpen on days that he's in, because he's willing and able to go deep into games.
Yeah, he very routinely was going 5, 6, and even 7. That's just so valuable, especially last year, because we did just not have a very deep bullpen, and that was our consistent huge issue. Was we had at least a couple of starters that at times could give us good games, and then we had Tyson Neighbors at the end, but we didn't really have a lot of guys that were consistent in the in-between. And Owen Borema, getting back to have somebody that can really get you 5 to 6 on any given night, that's awesome. That's a huge plus for this pitching staff. And I'm hopeful that we can expect a lot from Owen Borema this year. His ERA ended up being a little high a bit higher than I thought it was, honestly, but I think some of that may have just been finishing the season not as strong. But throughout most of the year, he was quite good. Nearly hit 100 strikeouts on the year as well with 95. Really, really good job, honestly, from Borma, and pitching by far the most innings on the team last year as well. Just he's everything that you want out of a day one starter, your Friday night guy. He's just really, really quality. There's not much more you can ask for from him, especially from somebody that he was a D3 transfer. We didn't really know how he'd translate, and he has ended up really working out.
Yeah. But the second name in the rotation, which granted, we don't know the official rotation or how it's going to pan out, but we can make a few educated guesses based off of things that we've been hearing through the tea leaves. And it appears the day two starter will be none other than Ty Rule, the former number one setup guy, not number one reliever, that's Tyson Neighbors. But Ty Rule came in, had 2 starts towards the back end of the year, one of which was in the Big 12 tournament where he had the flu up against Texas, and then he proceeded to have a Ty Rule flu game, quite famously. And he's worked his way into the rotation after being an up-and-down reliever, 5.31 ERA last year, but he seemed to get significantly better the moment that he entered the rotation. So he could be just one of those guys where getting that sort of rhythm will be very, very helpful for him.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Is the structure will probably help Ty Rule. Because he did, of course, famously have that flu game against, I believe it was Texas.
It was Texas.
Where he was just lights out on the mound. It was he was a guy that we were really hoping to see a lot of and a lot of good from. Going into the season last year, and he had a mostly disappointing season, but really figured it out at the end of the year, especially once he was kind of getting to that starting role. And once he got into that starting role, he became quite impressive, honestly. There was a lot to like about what Ty Rule did to end the year. He's an interesting pitcher. He has good stuff. It just wasn't working. Because there's there's pitchers where you can look at them and say they just don't have it. Ty Rule's someone that you look at and you more scratch your head and wonder why it doesn't work better than it does. And it seemed like he kind of started to put everything together by the end of the year, because he had some pretty bad relief appearances last year, but maybe getting to the starting rotation could be just what the doctor ordered for Ty Rule, because again, he had that great pitching performance against Texas in the Big 12 tournament, and had one other start at some point during the year, which I can't remember when that was.
It was like the week before that happened.
then I think you're probably right. But Ty Rule, really, he's been around for a while at this point. He's an upperclassman now, which is kind of weird to think about, because he's it feels like he's only just got here, but he's quite experienced at this point, and he's really earned his keep at this point, and I'm happy that he's sticking around and giving it another shot, because I think that if it comes together for him, I think we could really be in for a big year for Ty Rule.
Yeah, I agree. Now, the third name is probably the one that has the most question marks about it. I don't even think the third name is fully carved out in stone within the building, but the name that we've been hearing the most about would be Jacob Frost, who's a JUCO transfer, another left-handed pitcher. So our weekend starters will go left, right, left, which is, I believe there was a time where we went right, 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 and last year was left, right, right. Yeah. So, well, we didn't have a consistent day 3 starter then either. Yeah. But Jacob Frost is a JUCO transfer from Wabash College, or Wabash Valley College. Won 2 national titles there, or had 2 deep runs in the national tournament for the JUCO ranks. Ended up going 13-4, had some saves, 3.79 ERA, pitched 123.1 innings with 160 total strikeouts. So At the JUCO level, he was very productive, and he was also an innings eater, where he has 123.1 innings pitched and 160 strikeouts. So that's a very, very good ratio there. And it's one of those guys where you always are kind of speculating about how the JUCO guys are going to end up translating. It's very similar to Owen Borma's story coming from D3. It's like, well, how much of his game is going to translate? With Borma, it appears to work out quite well. Frost, I think, is probably... I think his game will translate pretty well, especially given the high strikeout rate that he had at Wabash Valley.
Yeah, and that's the common theme with the JUCO guys that we got at pitcher, is they all have wildly high K rates or strikeout rates. Those are all... It's clear that we have found a type at pitcher, and we are wanting guys that we can rely on to get big strikeouts, because we know that we play half of our games in a very batter-friendly park, and we can't afford to have pitchers that are letting every other ball go in the air, because on the wrong day with the wrong wind, half of the fly balls that go up are going to somehow find their way out of the park. So getting guys that can reliably get you strikeouts when you need them, that's going to be really valuable. And having somebody with that deep playoff experience at the junior college ranks, that could potentially be valuable for K-State if they end up making the postseason this year. Obviously, it's not directly translatable, but having somebody with some experience going deep in a season to be on our roster, that could potentially be really valuable. So I'm pretty happy with the addition of Jacob Frost, although, again, this day 3 guy could really be anyone. I feel much more confident in calling Borma and Rule day 1 and 2. I think it's unquestioned Borma will be day 1. Rule's probably like 90 to 95% day 2 guy. But there's probably plenty of names that we could look at to be the day 3 guy. I mean, Basin Bus was the day 3 guy at times last year, and he was fairly decent. Struggled a little more in conference play, but he finished with a 3.78 ERA and had 42 strikeouts and 18 walks. So pretty solid for a true freshman, all things considered, with a 1.38 whip, although a lot of his dominance was more in the non-conference. There were a few times in conference play where he really kind of get lit up, particularly against Oklahoma State. But granted, none of our pitchers were really doing that well against Oklahoma State last year.
No one was doing well against them. But before we get into the other names, such as weekday starters and bullpen guys, here's a quick word from today's sponsor. And welcome back to the Batcats preview, brought to you by the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Now we're just going to go into the potential weekday starting names before we get into the bullpen. We already talked about one just before the break, and that was Mason Buss, who got significant action last year. There are a few other names to know. The big one that I want to focus in on is Andrew Evans from Olathe, Kansas, and it's not because he's an Olathe product. He's 6'5", 245, and absolutely dominated his summer league. I think he had an ERA in the ones. Never mind. But he had 4.01 ERA in 24.2 innings pitched and was generally pretty solid top to bottom in the Futures League up in New Britain. The New Britain Bees of the Futures League, I should say. And he did end up making the league all-star game. So he made some very, very good headwind for a young guy coming out of, after making 6 appearances and 1 total start. He's someone that I would keep an eye on to perhaps maybe break out, maybe be the weekend starter or a weekday starter. The other name is one that we've sort of been higher and lower on, and that's Jack Wentworth. Jack, we're not sure top to bottom what Jack is at this point. We remember him being constantly touted as this insanely good prospect, but injuries got to him, so We don't know what he'll be. If he gets back to his dominant form that he had in high school, that's a really, really high upside guy who could even push into the rotation on weekends. If he's what we've seen before, he's probably a middle of the pack bullpen guy.
Yeah, Wentworth was very highly regarded out of high school. I believe he was a top 500 prospect nationally. I think he may have even been drafted and came to K-State. And just before his would have been true freshman season started, he hurt his throwing arm and had to get Tommy John. And that is just a really, really, really difficult injury to come back from as a pitcher. So last year as a redshirt freshman was not great from Jackson Wentworth. He started the year as the number 3 starter, but just didn't really have a very good season. An 8.72 ERA, a 1.91 WHIP, 27 strikeouts and 11 walks. It just wasn't his year, and I think a lot of that is that it's just really, really difficult to come back from a surgery like Tommy John. And if it is entirely possible that he getting this offseason and kind of shutting down his season a little early, that could really change things for him, because out of high school he was a high velo guy with a ton of upside, and he hopefully is able to put everything back together. I have not completely lost faith in Jackson Wentworth because we've only seen his redshirt freshman year. The only reason it was as disappointing as it was is just because of his recruiting rankings and stuff like that. So it's not. The curtains haven't closed on Jackson Wentworth's career. He's only a redshirt sophomore right now, and he could absolutely have a big turnaround and maybe even start thriving as a bullpen guy. But it remains to be seen because, again, there's not as much insider information to draw from baseball. We only know so much. But Jack Wentworth is someone that, if he can really put it together and get back to his pre-injury form, that could be huge for this K-State lineup.
Yeah. So I don't think that's all of the guys who could make pushes to be the weekday starter, but I do kind of want to move into the relievers, and I'll let you take the honors of the biggest relievers and other names that you think are going to be pushing for those prime roles.
Yeah, well, Tyson Neighbors is, of course, the big one. He's the closer. He's the All-American. He is the preseason Big 12 Pitcher of the Year as a reliever, which is just almost unheard of. But he was nothing short of completely dominant last year as a true sophomore. He's going to likely be the highest drafted college reliever in the upcoming MLB draft. He had a 1.85 ERA last year, 0.78 WHIP, which is incredible. 86 strikeouts, just 16 walks. There were a few times when he had a little bit of a cushion that his fastball velocity was pushing almost 100, and he brings so much in terms of pitching diversity. He has an incredible hammer curve, I think, and great slider. You know more about pitch types than I do. But he brings a lot. He has a lot of tools in his toolbox, and all of them are effective.
Yeah, he is a hammer curve, but his go-to pitch is his slider, and it's one of those sliders that keeps the high-end velocity. Like, it's consistently low 90s slider, and it just falls off the table. And whenever you get sliders like that, there's almost nothing that you as a batter can do, especially if you have to adjust for a fastball that rises like his does, because a lot of fastballs follow a more traditional arc, His doesn't. His literally rises. So you have to sort of pick what you're getting with Tyson Neighbors, and if you guess wrong, you don't stand a chance.
No. I mean, he was just the epitome of dominance last year, and there's no reason to expect anything different from Tyson Neighbors this year. He made 25 appearances. He had 11 saves. He was just incredible all of last season. 48 and 2/3 innings, There's a reason that he pitched as much as he did, and that's because he was far and away the best reliever that K-State had. Was not particularly close.
He was second on the team with strikeouts with 86, and he was a reliever.
Yeah, and he did that. He got 86 in a little over half the time that Borma got 95. And that's not a slight at Borma. That is just Tyson Neighbors is that good, sort of thing. So if you have the chance, you should make every opportunity you can to watch Tyson Neighbors in a Batcats uniform, because it is not every day that we get to see someone that dominant come through Toyton Family Stadium, because he is really, really good and should be an MLB pitcher sooner rather than later. Maybe he'll follow a similar trajectory as Jordan Wicks, and relievers as dominant as Neighbors, they sometimes find themselves getting drafted by World Series contenders and get called up for deep playoff runs.
Yeah, like September playoff call-ups.
Yeah, so it's... I'm not saying he's going to do that, but he fits the mold of someone that may fall into that park. And on top of it all, he's I'll call him bloodthirsty competitor. He's absolutely relentless on the mound. So there's just so much to like about him. He's incredibly entertaining, and all you can do is laugh sometimes when you watch him pitch.
Yeah. There any other major names that you want to highlight? I know there are a few new names, but there's one name in particular that I'm thinking of for a returner from the previous year.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you on this, and that's left-handed pitcher Cole Weisenbaker. Played some last year. He made 15 relief appearances and started off the year pretty well, but kind of trailed off once we hit conference play. He only had an 8.5 ERA, which is not the best, but he does have a lot of upside as a guy with an awkward arm angle, which in college baseball that can take you a really long way. If you can make use of that arm angle, then you could be something special. But Cole Weisenbaker, the summer league as well, he pitched 18 in the third innings. The New England Collegiate League had a 196 ERA, and then had 16 strikeouts against 9 walks. So again, needs to work on his control a little bit. That's something that is going back to last year. But he is somebody that I think could be really effective in certain situations. And if he works on his control and gets better at baiting batters, then he's somebody that I think we could see really be kind of a bridge pitcher and be someone to take up an inning before we throw in Tyson Neighbors, just to try and keep Neighbors' innings down. Because, we can throw him out there and he could probably dominate for 3 innings in a row. But if we're planning to make the postseason, which we should be, then we should want to be keeping Tyson's pitch count as low as possible during the regular season. And Cole Weisenbaker is someone that could absolutely help with that.
Yeah. But there are also a lot of new names, a lot of JUCO guys, one of which you saw live and has been described as one of the guys with the funkiest arm angles in the Big 12.
Yeah, and that's Preston Martinez, 6'1", 180, out of Dyersburg State Community College. He's a righty, and last year had a 2.59 ERA, and had 35 strikeouts and 24 in a third. Over his time in community college, he made 49 appearances and pitched 54 innings and had 77 strikeouts. But he had a very, very strange delivery that I could not wrap my head around. I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but the ball was getting over the plate, so more power to him, I guess. But he certainly had a very interesting delivery, and I took a video of it. I'm trying to find it because it was his plant leg, which is in such a strange position.
Yeah, we have a bunch of guys with really funky angles. Preston Martinez, I think, will just be one of them. But as long as we can get more guys with funky angles, it almost doesn't matter because, you said it earlier, that's a killer in college. Just ask whatever the guy who was throwing 78 against us in Stonehill.
Yeah. I mean, I think Pete Hughes has kind of seen the effectiveness of those guys with the wacky arm angles, especially against our lineup, and is saying, well, we'll just try that ourselves. And Preston Martinez was pretty effective in the limited action that we saw in our scrimmage against, it was Iowa Western, I think, this past fall. But he's somebody I think we could see a bit of this upcoming year. And there's a few other JUCO guys as well. We already mentioned Jacob Frost as a starter, but there's Sam Roberts as another JUCO transfer. I liked what I saw from him, and he had really good numbers too. In 2023, he had a 1.35 ERA in 20 innings pitched, and had a K rate of 13.5 strikeouts per 9 innings, which is exactly what we're looking for. He's kind of similar build. I can't remember if he had a weird arm angle or not. It hardly matters if he's pitching as effectively as he is, but he was another person that I thought was pretty interesting. But at the end of the day, we really threw a lot of darts at the board with our transfer pitchers. A guy like Josh Wintrib was somebody that I think maybe could be a bit of a sleeper going into this year. He had 5 years at Augustana College, which I think is a D3.
It is.
And he went 16-5, pitched 175 innings, 2.88 ERA, and then had 223 strikeouts in his time at Augustana. So he really was quite dominant at times. And then in 2022, his career high in appearances, he made 15, had a 2.71 ERA and 96 strikeouts that year. And then last year, he went with a 2.52 ERA and struck out 107 and walked just 11. And opponents only hit 189 against him. So he's somebody that if the game translates from D3 for him, like it did for Owen Borma, then he's someone that could be a sleeper going into this season that we've not really heard a lot of, but the stats really pop off the page with him. Like 107 strikeouts to 11 walks in a season at any level is kind of nuts.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So he's somebody that we should maybe keep an eye on going into this year.
Yeah. I think that pretty much does it for pitching. Now we can move into the position players, starting off with catchers. And the big name here is going to be Rafael Pelletier, who did end up staying over the summer and working out. And first off, he speaks 3 languages, which is just a fun fact. It's just cool. But he was also one of the better defensive catchers in the league, which we've had a lot of good luck in terms of defensive catchers with Justin Mitchell and the like. And although Justin Mitchell moved slightly faster than erosion, Justin Mitchell is still a very good defensive catcher, and Rafael Pelletier sort of follows in that mold, and he's probably the projected starter.
Yeah, I don't think it should be a contest, honestly. Pelletier was fantastic last year as a defensive catcher. His bat went cold at times, but he did have some power to his game intermittently. If he can get his batting average up from a 2.57 to maybe like a 2.8, I would be pretty happy with that. And I'd be especially happy if he could just get a bit more consistent. And I also would really like if one of our backup guys could step up defensively. So that way we can give Pelletier a few more days off, because he was the definition of an everyday starter. And that's why he had to stay in Manhattan just to recover, because he was spending so much time behind the plate that I imagine it was really taking a toll on him. But Pelletier was one of, if not the best defensive catchers in the entire Big 12 last year. And I expect that to be the same this year. But we have a very deep catcher room right now. There's honestly 5 guys here that I would be comfortable seeing in some fashion, whether it be at catcher or DH or elsewhere. There's not a single player in the catcher room that I am like uncomfortable seeing on the field. Granted, one of them is mostly projection with the freshmen, but there's a lot to like in this room.
Yeah. Caden Phillips and Jaden Lobliner were both pieces last year. Jaden Lobliner may be in the contention for being he may be switching off with Kyan Lotus for who gets the DH job. But, of course, you also have Mason Schwalbach, who is a transfer from McHenry College. He's a catcher/first baseman. Probably another situation where he's fighting with Lotus, probably for first base, because I believe Lotus is first base, corner outfield positions. But the one that you were specifically mentioning was Nick English, who's a true freshman from Olathe, who has been getting quite a bit of hype.
Yeah. He is a very highly regarded prospect out of high school. Nick English was on Perfect Game. They graded him a 9. He was a top 500 prospect. He was the number 8 prospect in the state of Kansas and the top catcher in the state. One thing that sticks out to me is the fact that his name is getting thrown in these conversations already. It's very early for him to kind of already be in this realm of getting run. It's kind of getting more and more rare to see freshmen play early in college baseball. So when you see a guy play early, it means something. We saw Kalen Culpepper start as a freshman, and there was a reason for that. Nick Goodwin did too. But Nick English, another thing about him is that he's really fast for a catcher. He was in the 90th percentile for 60-yard split for players in his class. So that includes outfielders and infielders and everyone. And he's a catcher. So he's listed as catcher/outfield right now. So
MJ Melendez.
Yeah, so he's pretty much just MJ Melendez, but he brings a ton of power as well. He's somebody that I think we should keep our eye on as making a major impact this year because he's really quality, especially for a younger guy. So I think that we could maybe see a little bit of Nick English this year, but I like all the guys in this catcher room.
Yeah. Then in terms of starting infielders, we can start with the two biggest ones and then get into the more projective ones. One is the guy who's listed as an infielder because he could probably play anywhere, but he'll probably slide into shortstop, and that is who was the best defensive third baseman maybe in college baseball last year, and that's Kalen Culpepper. Hopefully he has a season where he stays healthy for once. That was me knocking on wood. But when he's on the field, he may genuinely be the best pure baseball player on the team. His bat speed is nuts. His arm is nuts. His ability to field and consistency are both nuts. He has plus speed. It got to a point where you and I were calling him the most underrated athlete in all of K-State last year. Now, funnily enough, he probably doesn't have that title this year. That's someone else on this team. But Kalen Culpepper, I don't think I can overstate how good Kalen Culpepper is.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it because he was fantastic last year. He just missed some time with a hand injury. But when he was on the field for most of the back half of the season, he was just absolutely dominant defensively and was a plus at the plate as well. He brings some great power. And he also competed with Team USA this past summer. With Tyson Neighbors, which is something we forgot to bring up with Neighbors. But Culpepper didn't just play for Team USA, he was dominant for Team USA. He was really great for Team USA. He and Neighbors were both getting a ton of run. And of course, he's got a long list of accolades. And I mean, this summer for Team USA, he had 4.71 and added 2 triples, 3 home runs, 7 RBIs. He had 9 starts. He slugged .853 and had a .526 on base percentage, which is kind of unbelievable. And then he went and played in the Cape Cod League and hit .270 and was great there as well. there's not much else to really say about him, other than he will certainly be drafted this upcoming year. He may be a first-round pick this upcoming year in the MLB draft if he stays healthy and is able to perform to the best of his abilities. But he is one of the most gifted baseball players to come through K-State in a long time. And he's another person that's just a ton of fun to watch.
Yeah. But now we have to talk about the person who has seemingly stolen the title of most underrated athlete at K-State, and that's Brady Day. A lot of people aren't talking about Brady Day or didn't talk about Brady Day. He led the team in average last year, and it wasn't particularly close. He batted .356 last year. And not only did he bat .356, he walked 49 times compared to 22 strikeouts. There were times where I was looking at the zone, and if the umpire didn't agree with Brady Day, I knew that the umpire was wrong. Brady Day is not only probably, we just called Clayton Culpepper the best pure baseball player. Brady Day might be the best pure hitter on the team, at least in terms of average. And he's a solid enough defender at second base as well. But yeah, he might have taken the title from Clayton Culpepper as most underrated, and it's just because Clayton Culpepper is now properly rated.
Yeah, and Brady Day, last year, he was just so consistent throughout the year because he started the year great with his walk to strikeout ratio, so I figured surely this is going to equalize over time, and it really didn't. He continued to see the ball really, really well. He's not a power hitter by trade. He only had 3 home runs, but he had 69 hits on the year, and he just, and to quote a fantastic baseball movie, he gets on base.
He gets on base. What does he do?
He gets on base. That's all he does. He had on base percentage of just under 50% at a .492. He got hit by 7 pitches as well, which was among the top of the team. Clayton Culpepper will always take that honor, though. But this was just great stuff from Brady Day. I do think his defense is a little bit underrated. He did have a few major mishaps, but his thing is that a lot of times those came in big moments. But Brady Day, he's just so quality at the plate. He's such a consistent presence at the plate. And it's massive to just have someone that doesn't strike out a lot, like Brady Day. He is just consistently putting the ball in play. I mean, only 22 strikeouts on the year is pretty fantastic. And on top of that, only grounded to a double play once the entire year, which is pretty great. And that's something that some players aren't as good at. But that honestly is a bit of a skill in of itself. But Brady Day, he was drafted as well this past summer by the Red Sox.
Braves.
And, the Braves. And he elected to return to K-State instead, which is huge. It's absolutely massive for us. So I'm very happy that Brady Day is here. I imagine this is probably our last year of Brady Day.
Probably.
But he is. It's so important to have a guy like him on this roster, has so much experience and is such a consistent hitter.
Yeah. Then the corners are sort of where the question marks begin because again, we've heard a few names. We've already mentioned Kyan Lotus, so we'll start with him. Kyan Lotus just hits Kyan Lodongs. That's just what he does. Like, he only batted .194 last year, but consider the fact that he had a .622 OPS, .306 slugging. None of these numbers, pop out at you. But then you watch him play, and every time that he makes contact with the ball is dead. The ball dies. And I don't mean as in, warning track power. No, I mean that he's ripping the cover off the damn ball.
Yeah, and the big reason that Lotus's numbers aren't better is because he really, really struggled to start the year.
Yeah.
He was a true freshman, I believe, last year. I had a redshirt freshman.
I think he was a redshirt freshman.
But we threw him into the starting lineup to begin the year, and he really just wasn't quite ready yet. And that was obvious. So we let him. So we put him back on the bench, and then later, once conference play started, he started to come back. and he hit some massive home runs and had some great opposite field power as well. Yeah, because he
The
had
famous uh-oh shot.
yeah, he had some great hits in that KU game that had like a football score. He had an opposite field home run against maybe TCU, I think. But he is somebody that you can look at in the box and tell that the raw talent is there, and it is coming together at times for him. But if he just gets a bit more consistent, he's going to be a weapon on the plate.
Yeah. The other two major transfers, and that's not to disrespect anyone else who transferred in, but the other two major ones are Daniel Rivera from Southern New Hampshire and then David Bishop, the former TCU player. We've had some decent luck with former TCU players like Cole Johnson, but starting off with Daniel Rivera from New Hampshire probably settles in. You look at his size, 5'10", so he's probably not going to be a first baseman. Probably slots into second or third base pretty well.
If I had to guess, I would pencil him in as our day one third baseman, because I think Brady Day's going to hold down second base just fine. But I can absolutely see Daniel Rivera being our third baseman. I think that he brings a lot of talent to the table. He hit 321 with 434 slugging and 519 on base in his time at Southern New Hampshire. He had 22 home runs and 44 doubles. He had 90 RBI. Generally was really great. He was first team all conference his final season, I believe, and was just generally really good. And I don't have his stolen base numbers in front of me, but I seem to recall him having really good stolen base numbers as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Daniel Rivera brings, because it's been mainly Kalen Culpepper the last couple of seasons, and before that it was Cam Thompson. So we've generally had some really consistent play at third base. So there's not been a lot of turnover there. But this time it's for a good reason, because we have our guy at third base who's so good that we're moving him back to his natural position of shortstop finally. So I imagine that's only going to help him. But Rivera, he's just a one-year guy, but I like the idea of a stopgap here just to fill the gap and let a few younger guys grow a little more.
Yeah. Then you have David Bishop, who, if that name sounds familiar, it should, because I remember him playing against K-State his freshman year, and he was a member of the Big 12 all-freshman team in his true freshman season before he ended up getting injured / overtaken, probably just injured at TCU. But getting a former all-Big 12 all-freshman team member is very good, especially when I distinctly remembered his name whenever he transferred here, and it wasn't positive memories. But now he's here, probably to make positive memories. Again, you look at his size, 6'3", 210. That's a stereotypical first baseman. So I would imagine he probably slots in as in a dogfight with both Schwabach, Schwalbach and Lotus for first base. I'd say Bishop is probably the favorite to win the job, though.
Yeah, he. I believe the story with him is that he did deal with injuries for a lot of his sophomore campaign at TCU, and that was why we saw a decline in play. But he had a really good freshman season at TCU, hitting 245 over his career there, but had a much more impressive 2022 as opposed to 2023. Because in 23 he just wasn't able to do everything he had been able to do in the past, but he's hyper talented, really athletic, and somebody that I think if he doesn't start this year, we're going to find something for him to do next year, because we're probably going to have quite a bit of turnover next year. But I really like David Bishop. I don't have as much to say about him, just because I didn't see as much of him in the one fall game I was able to get to. But I like his potential a lot.
Yeah. So that's the major infield names. Now we can start talking about the outfielders, starting with the returners. I think the big returner is Brendan Jones, Brajo, because we always have to have some sort of outfielder whose last name starts with a Joe, so we can do the blank Joe joke. Then the lefty center fielder plus defensive center fielder with amazing speed. That's pretty much Brendan Jones's game. Stereotypical leadoff guy.
Yeah. The only thing that he really struggled with last year was that his strikeout rate was very high for a leadoff guy. But he also brought an unusual amount of power for someone with his frame. He's only 5'10", 180-ish, but he had some huge hits at times. He had and at times was also really clutch in Big 12 play. But he's really good in the field. Of course, that goes without saying. But if he can just get a little bit more consistent at seeing with his plate vision, then he's really going to become a great weapon for us, because he ended up only hitting 238 despite having an OPS of 787. He did draw a lot of walks at 45, but just kind of volatile there with the walk to strikeout numbers. But at the plate, he does have a lot of upside. So I'm not super worried about him. I think an offseason of work could really go a long way for Brendan Jones.
Yeah. And then you have names like Carson Queck, who, again, is just another example of a pure baseball player. But I think the big-time name here is Chuck Ingram, the transfer from Wichita State, probably the gem addition of the offseason for Pete Hughes' squad. He was ranked the number 55 overall transfer by D1 Baseball, was a two-time first-team AAC conference pick, and he batted, in his last year there, he batted .362, .437, and then .579. Oh! This is a legitimately great pickup for K-State, who's probably going to slot in to either left or right field, and he's just that big-time bat that at times we were lacking last year. Because we had a lot of guys who could hit for power, such as Roberto Pena, who he would either hit a home run, a double, or strike out. But we lacked that consistent average hitter outside of Brady Day, and I think that's what Chuck Ingram brings to the team.
Yeah, I mean, this was the big-time pickup. I think he put it well. He is going to step in and immediately be one of the best players on this team. He's somebody that we were very worried about last summer, potentially going pro, and somehow he did not do that. I think we're really lucky to have him on the team this year. And this is the sort of player that if you want to make postseason runs, you have to convince this type of guy that's like a fringe, might go pro, might not. You have to convince that guy to stay. And we did that, and he, I think, could be a real difference maker this year. This is the kind of guy that could be the difference between making the postseason and winning some postseason games, because he is a professional talent. There's no doubt about that. And so I'm very, very excited to see what Chuck Ingram brings to the table this year, because I think he probably starts in right field, if I had to guess. Maybe left. Regardless, he's starting somewhere.
Yeah, he's not on the bench. But the other contenders for the other outfield spot, right next to Brendan Jones and Chuck Ingram's probably Caden Carl, Carson Queck, maybe even Schwalbach, because Schwalbach can play multiple different positions. We don't know as much about Caden Carl. We do know about Carson Queck. Like we said, he's just a pure baseball player at this point. But that is the majority of the designated players, unless you want to talk about anyone else in particular before we move into big picture stuff like the schedule.
The only other name I may mention is a freshman pitcher, Blake Dean. He's somebody that got some early work in the fall game against Iowa Western, and I think that he could potentially be a bullpen guy this year that we see a decent amount of. He's another highly graded recruit. He has a 9 grade from Perfect Game, top 500 recruit, and was the 55th ranked prospect in the state of Georgia, which doesn't sound like much, but you have to keep in mind it's Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia, Texas, California are like the big three.
and then Florida as well. I mean, like all those Sun Belt states, plus California. I mean, there's so much baseball being played there. So getting a guy highly regarded out of a really great baseball state, Blake Dean, could really have a major impact this year if he's ready. And he honestly looked pretty good from what I was able to see of him. I don't know a ton about him, just with him being so young, there hasn't been as much buzz about him, but he's maybe somebody that could fly under the radar and be someone to watch this year.
Yeah. The roster top to bottom is without a doubt the most complete that Pete Hughes has had. Last year we had a couple of questions about, mostly about pitching, but also there were several spots, I'd say like maybe half of the field that we didn't know a whole lot about. At the time we didn't know much about Pelletier. Definitely didn't know anything about who was going to play first base. The only things that we knew was that we had Kalen Culpepper and Nick Goodwin. So we knew it was going to be a fun team because those are two really fun players. But we didn't know a whole lot else about the team. This year doesn't have that problem. This year has a lot of known commodities and a lot of good, consistently known qualities. The weakness, I think, in this team is still the unknowns in the bullpen. But it's gotten to the point where we threw enough darts just with JUCO guys. At least 2 or 3 of them have to hit.
Yeah, I think we've talked about that a lot this offseason, how it seems that our JUCO pitcher recruiting strategy was find guys with really high strikeout rates and, if possible, guys with weird deliveries and just throw darts at the board. And you're going to at least accidentally get a good pitcher. But based on what I've seen, I think that we got probably a pretty solid hit rate on some of those guys. I think there's a few guys there that are really impressive. And again, we don't need, incredible all-American pitchers. We need guys to eat a few innings now and then. And I think that there's a lot of guys in the bullpen that could do that. And I think that's still probably the biggest unknown right now, that and maybe who the left fielder is, but it's not the same unknowns that it was last year, where last year we just genuinely didn't know what to expect going into the season, whether it be good or bad. This year, for the first time since Jordan Wicks was here, there's really some expectations around this team. And I think that they've scheduled for that as well.
Yeah, because the schedule that they have is the big knock against the schedule last year was that our RPI wasn't very good. So even though we won more games and in fact swept a team that ended up in the tournament as an at-large team in Oklahoma, our RPI wasn't high enough for them. We decided to rectify that issue. It came at a few costs, but our opening games are up against Cal, Boston College, and Georgetown, all three consistently above 500 teams down in the desert. Then the first massive game, I don't want to say that those first 3 are nothing games, because all those are big. That's how you open your season. That's how you prove the RPI people need to shut up. But the first massive game is at Arizona State. That, to me, is a barometer game. And I know it's baseball. You can't really pick out one single game that say, oh, this is your marquee game. I think the Arizona State game is a massive sort of prove-it game. Because then you go into Holy Cross, UMass Lowell, and then you hit the big 2. In Tennessee and Clemson on back-to-back days in Tennessee and at Clemson. The early games are going to be really important for this team.
Yeah. Scheduling Tennessee and Clemson was massive because that was just the sort of presence that we just didn't really have last year in our non-conference. But those are massive non-conference games. Tennessee has been a really quality program the last few years in particular. Clemson's been really good too. That 2-day stretch there is a huge opportunity, and if nothing else, is going to really help our RPI just by scheduling tougher games. Because whether you like it or not, RPI really punishes you for even winning against bad teams.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality of the situation. And K-State has gone out of their way this year to generally do a better job scheduling. We still have a few less difficult games here and there. But one thing that you'll really notice is that with our home midweek games, we don't have a lot of Tuesday, Wednesday, like short series games. We have a lot of one-offs against particular teams. And I think that's intentional because last year we really struggled in those midweek games because in the era of the transfer portal, those games are kind of equalizers because teams don't really have the depth. In case like high major teams don't have the depth to just dominate those midweek series like we're maybe used to. So they can't just win 2 straight games against nobodies unless you're cream of the crop. And to do that, you're basically saying you have 5 starter quality pitchers. And that's not something you can just bank on when you're scheduling nowadays. So K-State really went out of its way to most of the time only be playing 1 midweek game with a few exceptions, one of those being the Tennessee-Clemson stretch where I imagine we're going to be seeing some more weekend arms than normal. And then we have a stretch against UConn and I think Northeastern.
Yes.
Which I believe they both may have been tournament teams last year. I think at least one of them was a tournament team last year. But for the most part, this is a really good schedule. And we made our complaints known. I think we handled the getting left out of the tournament about as well as we could. In that we made our complaints known. We made our case for why we thought that they screwed up. But at the end of the day, you have to adjust for what is expected of you. And that's what we did. Because it'd be one thing if we complained, but then continued to grovel and change nothing. Because you're just asking for trouble with that. But K-State identified the issues and made active steps to solve them. Missouri State as well, getting a home series with them. Missouri State's a quality team. Just a couple of years ago, they were a regional squad. So we got 3 home games with them, and then we're playing a return game a few weeks later, just a one-off in the midweek. So this is a good schedule. There's not a lot of gimmies on here, but that's K-State putting a lot of faith in its team and expecting a lot and setting the bar high, which I'm pretty happy with.
Yeah, I agree. But now all we have is one final question, and that is, what are our expectations for the team?
I think anything less than making a regional is a disappointment because this is probably our best roster since 2013 when we made a super regional and we hosted. I honestly don't know if it's close. We've had maybe better star power at times. Like with Jordan Wicks, he may have been on his own a brighter star than Neighbors and Culpeper, and that's no slight at them. But just having that day one ace be your number one guy is just a little different. But this year's team has a ton of talent on it. There's only a couple of question marks, really, and one of them is who's going to be our consistent power bat and who is going to step up in the bullpen. But even then, those are not as serious of questions as we've had in the past. So I think the conservative expectation should be to make the postseason. And frankly, I think this team's talented enough to win at least a few games in the postseason. And I think if we don't make the postseason, that's just a massive disappointment and a huge missed opportunity. But I think on paper, this team has what it takes to make it to the postseason, and they're certainly hungry because I'd imagine they're still pretty sore about being left out.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say. I think that this team is very similar to our preseason expectations for the women's basketball team. They're not going to be the women's basketball team. Because even adjusting for everything else, it's not that level of talent where they're not number 2 in the country right now. But it's one of the most talented teams that we've seen walk through Manhattan top to bottom in a very, very long time. you have the star power and you have the transfers who are coming in with a lot to prove. I agree with you. I think anything less than winning some postseason games, making it there to begin with, I think it's a massive disappointment. Because the talent on this roster, there's absolutely no reason why this team can't make at least a decent run into the postseason. I'm not saying I expect them to automatically go to Omaha. I don't expect that. But I think that this is a team that could do that. I think the talent on the roster is good enough to.
I think it's our best shot at making it to the College World Series since 2013, when we were just a couple of outs away from making it. This year is not out of the realm of possibility for this team to be good enough to host or to make a super regional. I think that this is potentially, I think this team could potentially make it to Omaha. Some things will have to fall the right way. They'll have to avoid injuries. But I think if K-State plays its cards right this year, I think that they could make a bit of a postseason run. But that remains to be seen, because this team's going to have to capitalize, and it's going to have to take advantages. It's going to have to take advantage when it's given opportunities. There's not going to be a lot of margin for error when we really get down the brass tacks throughout the course of the season. But this team has a lot of potential.
I don't even think it's just potential, because I know one thing for certain, and this is the exact same note that I ended off on last year. This team's going to be fun.
Yeah, this team will definitely be fun. I'm looking forward to the pitching, especially because I think we have a lot of fun pitchers on this team. And I think we're going to be a great defensive team as well. If this team can grasp the mental side of it and not make boneheaded mistakes like we've seen K-State baseball make in the past, even to just a lesser amount, that could really go a long way.
Yeah. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign off?
I am extremely excited for this baseball season, and I just can't wait.
How crazy is it to be a K-State non-Rev fan right now with women's basketball and the Batcats?
I feel pretty spoiled right now. Volleyball had a great season too. Soccer. And then track and field is doing pretty well right now. But
men's golf's coming up.
Yeah. They're even the ones that I follow more casually. I mean, you can't really sit and watch men's golf. Like you literally can't. They don't broadcast it. I wouldn't anyways, even if they did. But no, there's a lot to be proud of right now in the K-State athletic department, and I'm hoping that the baseball team can continue that and they can really step up this year, because I think that they really could. I think that there could be a lot of fun times ahead at Twain this year.
I agree. So that pretty much wraps up the Batcats preview. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email the show, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I'm at ACEdward00.
I am at Connor Baltasor, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, as well as our supporter links, both of which are in our podcast and Twitter bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.